GEMP, written by J. Carrail Jones, narrated by Lauren Sweet. Please check out the timestamp to skip the intro music.
Look in our eyes and understand we are a better reflection. Human, but not engineered to be better, to be different. A clean slate to mark up, an empty glass to fill. We are the future, body, mind, and soul. Speaking by voice and by hand, learning to cope and adapt. We are engineered. Treat us well and be friends. Fight us and be our enemy. We are here now, your future you created. Teach us and we will learn. Superior, special, talented. We are great, we are engineers. This is our story from the dawn of humans. From Lucy to Lucy, thinking better because we are. Look in our eyes and understand we are a better reflection.
Chapter 8. Steve, Kelly, and Oscar were still in the lunchroom when Gurnier approached their table. Kelly gestured for him to join. Oscar jumped from his seat. Gurnier caught him and gave Oscar a head bump. The chimp grinned teeth and cooed. Gurnier sat down, placing Oscar next to him. "I got good news and bad news." Steve nodded. "We heard the announcement over the PA." Gurnier smiled. "That's part of the good news." Kelly asked, "What's the bad news?" She had her hand on Steve's arm. His smile faded. "Because of our friend the Colonel, the project is being shut down." "That's terrible news," Steve said. Kelly asked, "What's going to happen to the Gemps?" Gurnier's smile returned. "We're moving to phase 2 of the project. We are," Steve said. "Wait, phase 2? Gurnier nodded. "You didn't think Uncle Sam would use the Gemps for religious studies their entire lives?" Steve slowly shook his head. "At some point, we'd have to deal with superstitious Gemps. Now is probably better than later." Steve took a deep breath. "Okay, what is phase 2? Gurnier stood up. "Follow me to my office and we can talk." Pierce and a dozen soldiers stood in the colonel's room. Codper had put the bottle down and now faced them. He shaved and had his ACU on. The Bible was in his left hand. "Those creatures out there are a threat to the natural order of things. In our arrogance, we created life in His image, but life as an abomination, an unpure monstrosity that mocks our very existence. This mockery ends today." The men around him nodded. Pierce stepped out. "Colonel, of course, we're with you. They have to go. Everything has to go." Codper asked, "I take it you've worked out details?" Pierce rapidly sucked in air between his front teeth. The smack sound was loud. "Of course, sir, and with your approval." Codper studied the young man. Was he one to trust? Probably not, but how was he supposed to save his kind? "Let's hear it." "First, we gather everyone into one room. Then we capture some wild Gemps and toss them in the room with the others. We shoot a few folks in Gemps and toss in some grenades. Then we release the other Gemps and hunt them down under the pretense they are dangerous. Once that's done, we call in for help. Blame everything on the Gemps and a few soldiers, not with us. While we were out getting the village Gemps, the other soldiers got too sloppy. We can guess the wild Gemps either got the grenades by accident and not knowing what to do killed themselves and everyone in the room, or some fool soldier held on too long. We stick to our story that we tried to round up the village Gemps and the deed is done.
Codper nodded. He liked the plan. Factor in the fog of war, and Pierce had a pretty good plan.
And we are the survivors.
Pierce nodded.
We give each man in this room a story to tell. Not the same story, of course. Different enough. Someone was by the door. Another person was down the hall. Someone saw some Gemps in the building. Some did not, but heard Gemp screams.
Codper nodded.
We'll also have to beat ourselves up a bit to make it convincing we fought for our lives, but we can pull this off.
Codper slowly smiled.
We could pull this off. I like it. Thank you, sir.
He turned to face one of those in the room.
Donalds, turn off the video and audio feeds, internal and external. McKinney, you, Rich, and Smithy release the wild Gemps. Capture a few and cuff 'em. Ford, Luke, Rogers, Threet, secure the control room. The rest is with me and the colonel. We'll round up Launse, Grenier, and the others. I got more of us guarding the exits, just waiting for the word.
Codper thought a moment, then quickly nodded.
Let's do this.
Grenier walked in first and sat behind his desk. Steve and Kelly took a seat, with Oscar jumping into Steve's lap.
Would anyone care for coffee?
Grenier asked. Oscar signed, "Coffee, please." Grenier smiled.
Certainly, Oscar. The usual amount of sugar and cream?
Oscar signed, "Yes, please. Sugar. Yum." Grenier got up and walked over to a small kitchenette at the corner of his office.
First, Phase 2 is about teaching the Gemps basic Common Core lessons.
He put in 2 scoops of instant coffee grounds into a coffee mug. Oscar's name was stenciled across the side.
The government wants the Gemps taught at a college level, and...
Steve interrupted.
Taught? As in attending school?
Grenier scooped in 2 heaping piles of sugar using a small spoon. He poured about 2 seconds worth of cream. He stirred the spoon as he poured hot water into the cup. After a moment of stirring, he walked over to Oscar and handed the cup of coffee to him. Oscar took the cup and sipped, just the way he liked it. Steve cleared his throat.
As in attending school?
Grenier nodded slowly.
Something like that.
Kelly leaned forward. Ken, what are you not telling us? No need to withhold any information now, Grenier thought.
Space is a pretty dangerous place,
he continued, before Steve or Kelly interrupted.
So is underwater exploration. So is subterranean discovery expeditions. Sending soldiers behind enemy lines is also dangerous work.
He paused for several seconds.
You see where I'm going with this?
Steve, horrified, answered,
I do, and I don't know how I'm feeling about that.
Grenier turned to Kelly.
What are your thoughts?
Kelly looked at Steve and Oscar, then back at him. It'll initially save their lives? Grenier thought she had been the quicker of the two. Steve was much too nostalgic and emotional. Kelly he liked a bit more than he often admitted. She was more pragmatic. What about their rights? Kelly asked.
As of now, they have none. They are all property of the United States government. But to put your mind at ease, they will not be overlooked, per se.
Steve interjected.
Per se? The Gemps are highly intelligent creatures. They have emotions. They think, and, more importantly, they can learn, of which is what makes them valuable. They shouldn't be thought of as property,
Steve said. Grenier shrugged and held it for a few seconds. He pursed his lips and raised both eyebrows.
I don't have an answer for that. Not a good one. But I can tell you that one day the Gemps will be granted full U.S. citizen status. But not today. Maybe not in a few years.
Steve asked,
How come? We had a hard time dealing with a debt ceiling. We have ultra-conservatives in our government who'll toss out the baby with the bathwater. We've been working quietly to get this far. The Gemps are under a provision that guarantees humane treatment and plans for their free retirement." Steve shook his head. "So much I'm not quite getting." Oscar kissed him on the cheek. Gurneer continued. "The Gemps will be allowed certain privileges." Kelly asked, "Like?" "Clothes, foods, certain types of property. Some things we have to educate the population first before they can walk freely. We're working out the details of pay." Steve frowned. "Pay?" "Yeah. Even if the Gemps aren't citizens, they will still work. We can't call them beasts of burden. They aren't farm animals. The one advantage they have, unlike the dolphins or Oscar, is that they can articulate emotions, desires, wants, and needs. Can you imagine the lawsuits from every lib organization on Earth if we didn't treat them like people?" Steve's frown deepened. "Steve, this nation still can't quite get it right with minorities. How do you think the neoconservative is going to react to genetically engineered, super-intelligent, teenage-like chimps walking freely? We'll have other sorts of problems with the active left as well." Steve started, "But," Gurneer said, "No buts. Warm and fuzzy, this can't be yet." Steve took a deep breath. "Okay, what is our role?" Gurneer relaxed a bit. "Mentor and instructor. I'll be getting involved in this phase." "As what?" Steve asked. Oscar finished his coffee and stretched out on Steve's lap. Coffee made him feel good, but sleepy sometimes. Or it could have been that he was only able to understand and follow a small part of what Gurneer talked about. Humans talk too much sometimes. They made him sleepy. "Depends on the task." Kelly added, "Mission?" Gurneer nodded. "Yeah, the mission. I just don't push paper." Suddenly, the alarm went off. Gurneer punched in the speed dial code to the main command center. It rang a dozen times before he got a disconnect tone. "Fuck, this is not good." He walked over to the door and opened it, just as he suspected. "Greetings, Colonel. Captain Pierce. I was just—" Codper punched him in the face a second time today. Gurneer stepped back a few feet and rubbed his jaw. That hurt. Codper drew his pistol and pointed it directly at his face. "You pompous ass. Give me a reason not to shoot you in the face now." He stepped up close to Gurneer. Pierce and the rest had M16A2s pointed at him. Gurneer grabbed the gun and pressed it hard against Codper's thigh, dislocating the trigger finger at the knuckle. Codper bit down a yell. Gurneer pulled the gun away and pointed it at Codper's face. "You pompous, arrogant ass back. Any other time I would have shot you in the face and not given you a second thought. I know how this is going to play out." He pressed the magazine release and caught it with his left hand. Bullets flipped toward Codper's face as he emptied the magazine. He tossed the magazine across the room and dismantled the Beretta M9. He chucked the barrel behind his desk and spun the handle at Codper. Codper was nursing his dislocated finger when the handle clipped him across the forehead. It left a nasty gash. The colonel took a deep breath and popped his finger back in place. He walked over and gave Gurneer a slap with the other hand. You. Gurneer walked out into the hallway. Other soldiers stood attentive with pointed M16s. Oscar signed, "Me bite, Colonel." Steve signed back, "No bite, Colonel. Bite will make you sick." Codper faced Steve and Kelly. "Launse, ma'am, please follow Gurneer." Oscar growled. Steve grabbed Oscar's face. "No growl. Be good." He and Kelly walked into the hallway and followed Gurneer and the other soldiers. Codper said, "Nasty beast. If I had my gun, I'd shoot the thing." Pierce watched everything. He liked Oscar. Pretty much everyone did. Strike 3 for the colonel. Gurneer heard several explosives. His first impulse was to run toward the sound. The M16s at his back squelched it. A second impulse wanted him to take Steve and the others in the opposite direction. The smell of death was in the air, and he saw no happy ending to this day. Codper moved ahead and hurried down the stairs. The doors to one of the rooms had been blown out. Scorched body parts and debris littered the entrance.
"What the fuck happened?"
A nearby soldier said,
"Someone tried to be a hero, sir. Boom."
Codper turned to face Pierce. Pierce shrugged.
"There's more than one room. You want to shoot them in the back?"
Codper answered,
"I wanted this to be clean and quick. Now it's—"
Grenier never let him finish. He grabbed the nearest M16, switched the selector to single shoot, and squeezed the trigger once at the soldier's face. Blood splattered in all directions. He squeezed off several more shots, all hitting dead center.
"Run!"
he yelled. Steve and Kelly ducked behind a station desk. Bullets sprayed the area in fits and blurps across the room. Grenier squeezed off several single shots in seemingly random directions, all finding a target. Then, the shooting stopped. Grenier looked up and saw several grenades tossed his way. 5-second fuses, he thought, as he jumped over the desk and caught 2 mid-flight. He twisted and threw both at the emergency door across the room. He landed near Steve, Kelly, and Oscar. 1 second to go, he thought, as he dragged the desk just enough to shelter everyone from the blasts. Oscar screamed as the first grenade blew. He squeezed Steve's neck tightly. The blast pushed them and the desk several feet. 2 more explosions went off further away. Gurnier's ears rang. He shook his head to clear the fog. Steve, Kelly, and Oscar seemed all right. Steve looked as if he were about to pass out. Oscar had a death grip, with long, chimp arms around his neck. Grenier grabbed everyone and made them run to the new hole in the wall. The emergency door is gone. Codper waited several seconds after the grenades went off. He stepped in the room and expected to see body parts and blood splatter everywhere.
"What the fuck?"
Only desk and computer debris scattered the room. He looked around and saw the emergency doors missing. Things got complicated. Tutu sat against a large rock near the remains of an old fire. Burnt logs buried in ashes jetted out. Tonight, they would start another fire and roast corn from the mystery box. He finished 1 apple and started eating a second one when he smelled dirty fur. He wrinkled his nose and turned to the forest edge. Immediately, the hair at the back of his neck stiffened. Intruder.
"Food,"
the figure said. Tutu strained to see the figure just inside the tree line. It hugged close to the ground.
"Food. Food want."
Tutu took several steps back, adding some distance between him and the strange creature.
"Show self, then food get."
The figure retreated further into the forest. Tutu took a step forward, stopped, thought a moment, took several more steps back.
"Want food? Show self."
The figure moved. It was quick. Tutu tried to track it visually as it faded further into the forest. Moments later, the figure was gone, and he heard a scream. He turned and ran. It was from one of the female village Gemps. Strange-looking Gemps had invaded his village. Within seconds, the village was overrun by filthy intruders. A wild Gemp jumped him. He twisted underneath it and swung his arm backward. He felt his fist contact teeth, and something gave way. The wild Gemp lay motionless on the ground. A wild Gemp was on moss, trying to bite his neck. Tutu clenched his hands together and gave it a powerful downward blow to the head. The wild Gemp's skull caved in, and the creature went limp. Moss looked up and gave Tutu a thank you sign. Both Gemps looked on and attacked as many wild Gemps as possible. 2 jumped on Moss, 3 on Tutu. Oscar ran ahead of the others. He heard the commotion and feared the worst. Hila and Femi in trouble. Hurry, he thought. Hurry. Hila, Femi in trouble. Must help. Run faster. On some subsurface level, Oscar knew things had suddenly changed. The Colonel, Pierce, most of the men on the base. They were different. The explosions, the pieces of people and the shooting, all scary, all terrifying. Lulos was on the ground. She struggled as a wild Gemp tried to mount her. She screamed, kicked, and screamed more. The wild Gemp became rock solid. This he was going to enjoy. He grabbed Lulos's neck and started to squeeze. Just as he was about to enter, Oscar jumped him. Powerful chimp arms pounded hard about his head and shoulders. The wild Gemp tried to get away, but Oscar's attack was relentless. Moments later, the wild Gemp stopped fighting back. Steve, Kelly, and Gurnier arrived to see Oscar step off the dead Gemp. They heard several screams toward the center of the village. Oscar moved first. These were his Gemps. No creature he thought would harm them. Ever. The wild Gemps were attacking the others. Gurnier ran over to 2 wild Gemps attacking Moss. Both were biting at and hitting him. Gurnier grabbed one Gemp and placed a chokehold on it. It screamed and clawed at his face. Seconds later, it went limp. A second later, Gurnier broke its neck. He hated to. Uncle Sam's money or not, this was survival now. Moss swung upward and hit the other Gemp in the jaw. It broke, but the thing continued attacking. Moss swung again as hard as he could. His arms ached. He swung again and again. He hit the face. He hit the head. He hit the head again. And again and again. He stood over a dead Gemp. Steve stood motionless, watching pandemonium. He saw Gurnier and Oscar in action, helping as they could. Even Callie tried to help. She kicked at a wild Gemp trying to rape a female. She pulled its hair and punched its face. Soon, both females were beating the poor creature into unconsciousness. Then a wild Gemp jumped on Kelly. It bit her in the shoulder and she screamed. He acted. He screamed like Oscar and struck at the animal. His anger was primal and fierce. His attack was ruthless. The wild Gemp cringed as Steve pounded with all his might. Kelly was his love, and no man or creature would harm her. He continued pounding at its chest and skull until it lay still. He breathed hard, his heart pounding. Murder is what he just committed. With his hands. He turned on the other wild Gemps. A dozen left. Attacking. He leapt into action alongside Oscar and fought. Both of them crazed creatures raining powerful blows down on the invaders. Moss looked on in awe. God and the Elder defending the village. The screams the two made, high-pitched and terrifying. Moss looked at both his hands and made fists. He joined the fray, not quite getting the yell right. But after a moment, he too was caught up in the frenzy. Arms high, power down, scream loud. Make the wild ones fear their wrath. The wrath of God, Elder, and the messenger. Then, silence. The village littered with dead and wounded wild Gemps. Steve was bruised badly across the cheek and arm, his clothing torn. Kelly's face was covered with dirt, her makeup smudged. Oscar's robe colored with dirt and blood. Gurnier looked perfect, his suit wrinkle-free and his hair neatly combed. Moss walked up to Steve. "God, you saved us!" Tutu walked up to Steve. He looked at Gurnier and Kelly, then turned his gaze back to Steve.
"Something not right. There is more than one of you. And these other Gemps?"
Gurnier and Kelly walked up next to Steve. He faced Tutu.
"You are right." He looked at Moss. "We have to talk. Things are about to change, and I have to be honest with you."
Moss said, "Honest? With me?" Steve nodded. He looked at Tutu.
"Others like us may be coming. The others are bad. They are the reason these other Gemps are here."
Tutu growled.
"Hate other Gemps. Crazy."
He then looked at Steve, Kelly, and Gurnier. Clothing strange, faces strange, all things strange.
"What does God mean?"
Steve answered.
"You have to send the village Gemps in the forest, to hide. I fear the worst.
Tutu repeated.
What does God mean?
Grenier leaned close to Steve.
I think he wants to know the meaning of God, not what you are saying is God.
Steve looked at Grenier for a moment. Then he looked at Tutu. Those eyes, Steve thought. Tutu is the one, not Moss.
Tutu, I am not God.
Moss, distressed, said,
God must not say such things. Moss see great scary things from God.
Steve knelt down.
I wish we had time to explain, but we really must hide. Everyone.
Grenier said,
I called in a support team earlier. Don't know how long they will take, so in the meantime, keeping out of sight is best.
Tutu said,
We will stay. No run.
Steve frowned.
Tutu, we are not running. We are hiding. No, I am not God. We must hide.
Steve stressed. Tutu shook his head slowly.
No.
Steve looked to Grenier. Grenier said,
We're probably priority 1. The Gemps are secondary.
Oscar suddenly looked alert. He pried into the forest toward the main building. He growled. Grenier said,
Yeah, I don't like them either. We should leave now. Staying in the village is definitely not in the Gemps' best interest.
Oscar yelped and jumped into Steve's arm. Grenier led the way. He and the others disappeared in the forest. Moments later, Tutu heard a rumbling sound. Moss stepped up next to him. He strained his eyes.
I hear sound too. Things are different now.
Tutu nodded. The rest of the village Gemps started to assemble near Tutu and Moss. Kiri stood next to Moss. Hila and Femi were near. The sound got louder, and the ground vibrated. Tutu caught a whiff of exhaust. He wrinkled his nose and growled. A moment later, a Humvee crashed through the tree line, followed by several more. Most of the Gemps scattered. Moss thought they looked like wide, hollowed-out tree trunks. Men like, I am not God, came through wearing strange colored clothing. They had thick sticks and strange tree branches in their arms. One of the strangers held a small, L-shaped stick. He pointed it at one of the Gemps. Thunder and smoke ripped from a hole at one end. Moss watched as blood spattered from the Gemp's head. It crumpled to the ground. Fear gripped Moss. God had been right. Run! He yelled out. Run! Tutu ran with him as rapid thunder erupted from the thick sticks and branches the evil creatures held. Run! Kiri, Hila, and Femi were near and followed as Moss crashed through the jungle. The last time he ran, he met God. This time it was because of God again. Codper saw the vile creatures scatter into the jungle. He put a bullet in one of them, and it felt satisfying.
Kill them all, he shouted. Kill them all!
Chapter 9. Captain Pierce looked on as his men and the colonel hunted the Gemps down. He thought they would have made great pets, especially the females. He watched the bootlegged copies of more than one Gemp sex video. Some of the soldiers, he thought, were sick perverts. They talked about how big the males got and called them knickers. When he finally caved in and watched his first video, he came within minutes. His guilty thoughts and how young the females looked made him sick to his stomach. It took 5 more viewings before guilt disappeared entirely. Now he was shooting them. He gave a heavy sigh as one female came into view. She was running toward him, not looking. He lifted up his rifle and laid the crosshair square center of her chest. She had small breasts that jiggled tightly as she bound over rocks and fallen tree branches. He pulled his finger away from the trigger and quickly scanned the area near her. She was alone. Pierce's palms started to sweat. He moved the scope back on the Gemp. She was still running toward him. He shouldered his rifle and slid behind a tree, waiting. His strike would be swift. Wheela ran as fast as she could. The bad creatures had been hurting the others, and she had to find safe shelter. Pierce waited and heard the Gemp rapidly move his way. When he saw an outstretched, furry arm, he grabbed it. Wheela was too shocked to say anything. The bad creature's grip was powerful. He pulled her in close to his chest and put a hand around her mouth. She found his thumb just above her lip. His other hand started groping her chest. She tried to scream, but his hand gripped tighter around her mouth. She grabbed his wrist and pulled down. His thumb touched her lips, and she clamped onto it with her teeth. He hit her in the back of the head. She bit down hard between the distal joint. Skin gave way, and her teeth cut neatly through muscle, tendon, and cartilage. He pushed her away, screaming at her. She backed off and spat the thumb out of her mouth. He aimed the rifle and squeezed off a round. The bullet missed her heart, but pierced her left shoulder, slicing through the lung and shattering the top part of shoulder blade. She fainted. Pierce cursed himself and spat at the Gemp. He stepped up to Wheela and rolled her over. He ripped her loincloth off, making her cheeks quiver. He stared at her butt and fantasized abusing it until the arch in his thumb became unbearable. He wrapped the cloth tightly around his wound and considered his options.
"Stupid little bitch," he uttered. "I ought to fucking rape your chimp ass."
He stared intently at Wheela, licking his lips. He sucked in air between his front teeth and lips. The pain in his thumb faded. He knelt down on top of Wheela and started rubbing himself on her. He could feel himself aroused, and he rubbed harder. He pulled himself out and started stroking with his right hand.
"You vile little bitch. I'm gonna make you suck."
He rolled the unconscious Wheela onto her back and moved himself up to her mouth. He played himself across her lips, getting himself wet. When he was about to explode, he slipped himself into Wheela's mouth and pumped fervently. Seconds later, he erupted. His entire body spasmed like never before. It was intense and extreme. Wheela woke up with a start. The bad creature had himself in her mouth, and she nearly gagged when he jismed. She was not afraid this time, but angry. No male Gemp would do such a thing unless given permission. She looked up and saw the bad creature, with closed eyes, shaking. She scowled and bit down as if she were biting into a rock. Stiffened tissue split, and her upper and bottom teeth met hard. The man screamed loudly as blood pumped out from what was left of his penis. Wheela had bitten off more than half. The bad creature fumbled for his rifle. Wheela coughed, strongly causing her to gag and vomit the soft piece out. She hissed at Pierce, wiped her mouth, and disappeared into the forest. Pierce fired his rifle at the receding Wheela. His aim was off due to throbbing pain from 2 embarrassing wounds, which could never be adequately explained. Gurneer made it to a crop of rocks at the bottom of the mountain. Kelly and Steve, breathing hard, emerged from the jungle tree line and collapsed at Gurneer's feet. Oscar had been sitting on a ledge, waiting for some minutes. He knew the area well. Gurneer said,
"Okay, we make a stand here."
Steve, still breathing hard, said,
"What stand? They have guns. We have nothing."
Gurneer shook his head.
"Wrong thinking. We have everything we need. We have Oscar, you, Kelly, myself. We have rocks and the high ground."
Steve said,
"We can't fight guns with rocks." "We can't fight guns with rocks. We have to hold them off until the cavalry arrives. Might be hours, might be days. But we have to try. Hiding is not an option. Not with me."
Steve answered,
"Fuck."
Gurneer squared off in front of the younger man.
"Steve, trust me on this. We have the advantage." "I want to, but..." "Steve, why this spot? I ran you guys 3 miles through dense jungle to here. Oscar knows this place. You should too."
Steve, breath caught, looked around. He spotted a remote camera high in one of the trees. Near the base on the mountain, he spotted a strange pattern of rocks. They were stacked rather neatly. The bottom rock had a small black ring near its bottom. The top rock had a small metal nipple in front. Grenier interrupted his thoughts.
You remember now?
Steve smiled. Hope was not lost. Tutu caught the elder's scent quickly. "I am not God's" scent was faint but distinct. He wanted answers. The village was attacked by dirty-smelling Gemps and bad creatures. He quickened his pace. Moss followed Tutu through the underbrush. This area on the place was thick with trees and plants. Further out was the salty water and the sand. There were lots of scary caves that held strange lights and sounds. Moss had forgotten about the caves. He remembered an encounter some time ago and started to slow down. Kiri came up beside him. "Moss, you slow down?" Moss picked up his pace.
Moss, okay.
Kiri wondered. Grenier entered the access code to the observation room. It was situated deep in one of the many caves that dotted the mountainside. The last time they used it was about 2 years ago, but it was still functional and had a cache of food, clothing, weapons, and communication equipment. Tutu followed the scents to a cave entrance some 10 feet above the ground. He remembered this one in particular. Strange noises and lights came from deep inside it. At the time, he was afraid to further investigate. He was young and scared easily back then. Moss remembered this cave as well. Tutu told him of the lights and noise. He was curious and made the long trip to see for himself. Smoke was coming from one of the rocks, and he heard moans. The fur on the back of his neck stiffened, and he couldn't go any further. Now he stood in front of the very cave that scared him not so long ago. Kiri, Gila, and Femi stood next to the 2 male Gemps. They noticed the expression on each of their faces. Tutu was purposeful. Moss was dread. Grenier had just settled into a command station. He flipped the power switch to the chamber earlier and waited a minute for all the computers and systems to come online. A proximity alert went off.
Fuck, not now.
He typed in a code, and the remote cameras searched the area. Tutu, Moss, and several other Gemps were at the base of the cave. He smiled and exhaled. Maybe this was the best time to wean the Gemps off mother's milk.
Steve,
he said.
We have company.
Steve stepped over to the monitor.
We have to get them in here.
Grenier nodded, but for different reasons.
I'm changing the access codes to all the doors. Belay that. I'm leaving the exterior door alone. We have to pull out some food before the Colonel and friends find us.
Tutu and Moss helped the other Gemps scale the 10-foot climb to the cave entrance. Moss caught the elder's scent. He wasn't sure if he should be glad or upset. Tutu stepped into the cave first. Moss hesitated a moment. Kiri placed a hand on his shoulder. "Moss?" Moss nearly jumped. He gave Kiri a glance, and he followed Tutu into the cave. Steve stepped out into the tunnel and stayed within the shadows. He watched the Gemps inch their way along the cave wall until Tutu was about 5 feet in front of him.
Stop,
he said. Tutu, startled, hissed. He squinted his eyes, and a faint image of Steve appeared.
What are you?
Tutu asked. Steve stepped into the dimmed light of the cave.
Human. My real name is Steve.
Moss asked. Not God? Steve said.
Moss, I am sorry. I deceived you. I am called a human. The bad men who invaded your village are also humans.
Tutu asked.
Why? Why the bad humans? Why? He repeated. Follow me and we can talk.
No, Tutu said. Steve knelt down.
Tutu, the bad humans are still out there looking for us. We are not safe in the tunnel. Follow me into safe shelter and you'll start getting answers.
Tutu hesitated. Moss said, I will follow. Go, Steve. Steve stared into the Gemp's eyes. He recognized the look of disappointment, or it could have been a projection of his own feelings of guilt and disappointment. He stood up and walked to the hidden door entrance. Moss, Kiri, Gila, and Femi stood behind him. It took Tutu a few seconds to make up his mind. He followed Steve. Chapter 10. Codper stood in the middle of the village. The ground was littered with dead Gemps. A deep satisfaction came over him as he stepped over several little bodies. To his right, he heard a female Gemp scream, then a single shot. 2 soldiers walked out from the forest laughing. One of them said, "Human TD." Both laughed again. Codper lifted the walkie-talkie to his mouth.
Captain Pierce, report.
Nothing.
Report.
He clicked the talk button twice.
Has anyone seen the captain? Sir?
Codper turned away.
Yes.
A sergeant stood with his M16 pointed down at the ground.
You ought to see this. Lead the way, son.
Steve walked through the disguised door. Oscar spotted Gila and Femi and ran to them. They embraced one another. Oscar signed, "Glad you are safe and here." Gila said and signed, "Elder, explain what has happened." Gurneer stepped into the light. He waited for Tutu, Moss, and Kiri to enter. The heavy door clicked shut.
I can explain.
All the Gemps turned to Gurneer.
Strange, I know. But if you can give me a few moments, you will have some answers. Follow me.
Gurneer led them into an adjacent room. The sergeant took Codper through a path of broken, low-hanging tree branches. Even before the colonel reached the spot, he smelled death.
Damn,
he said, as he saw Captain Pierce sitting up against a tree. His rifle's barrel rested against his right thigh, the rest of the gun between his legs. Codper knelt down and noticed the wound in his chest. Must have had it on auto when it went off, he thought. Then he looked down and saw Pierce's blood-soaked crotch.
What happened?
Codper asked, but he felt he knew. Suicide?
Not sure, sir. One of the Gemps, maybe?
The sergeant had a sense of what happened, too. Both men looked at each other. Codper blushed deep red. The sergeant a shade lighter.
Sir?
Codper stood up.
Is the lieutenant nearby? He was chasing down some Gemps, last report over the radio. Find him. We need to get Gurneer and the others to pull this off. Start checking the outposts.
The sergeant saluted, turned, and walked away. Gurneer sat in one of the chairs.
Please, have a seat.
The Gemps looked at one another. Gurneer said,
It hasn't been that long since you sat in a chair.
They hesitated. Oscar pulled out a chair for Gila and Femi. He sat in a chair next to the two. Gila sat first, then Femi, both looking like small adults in a large playroom for giants. Tutu sat next. He jumped over the armrest and planted his bottom solidly on the chair seat. Moss lifted himself up cautiously. He had a look on his face as if he remembered something. He looked over to Kiri, who was seated next to him. She nodded and recognized his expression. She, too, remembered something familiar about a table and chair. Gurneer cleared his throat.
Thank you. My name is Gurneer. First, I have to apologize. You may not remember this, but not too long ago you sat in chairs like these. You sat at a table and listened to a human, standing in front of the room like this one, teach you how to talk. A human taught you how to eat, cook, make bows and arrows. A human taught you how to...
Tutu yelled,
Enough!
Gurneer sat quietly, but he did not avoid eye contact with Tutu. After a moment, Tutu looked away.
I not believe you.
Gurneer nodded.
Fair enough. I'll be right back.
He walked out of the room for a moment. He returned with a remote control in his hand.
I'd like to show you something then.
Tutu watched the human as he moved his thumb across a small black strip of wood. A large white cloth came down from the top of the ceiling.
What is this?
He hissed. Gurneer ignored him for the moment. He thought, "This is theater, my suspicious friend," and smiled. Tutu looked across the room at the others. He was uncertain as how to act. Should he just attack the humans? Or wait? Then he remembered how Elder and not God, now Steve, fought off the dirty Gemps, the screams they made, the death they created. He would wait. Grenier pressed his thumb on the small bit of wood. The lights dimmed, and a projector dropped from the ceiling.
What you are about to see is moving mind images projected onto this white cloth. It's not magic. It is called technology. So please do not be afraid.
He pressed the play button. A large human face appeared on the screen. Femi jumped and screamed. Oscar jumped over to her chair. He hugged and cooed. Tutu and Hila hissed at the face. Only Moss and Kiri remained silent. Kiri frowned. She remembered something about the face. It was comforting and caring and happy. Moss looked over to Kiri. He frowned too.
Mary?
Kiri turned her head to face Moss. She nodded. Grenier said,
Mary Austin is her name. She was one of many caregivers who worked the farm.
Tutu walked over to the screen and peeked behind it. Grenier paused the video. He would wait. Moss and the others walked over to Tutu.
No one is here?
Tutu said.
It is a projection. An image of the person. Like looking into the lake, except we can show the image many times, anytime. No one is here?
Tutu repeated. Moss said, No one is here. Hila said, No one is here. Femi said, No one is here. Kiri said, No one is here. The Gemp circled the projector screen several times, crossing in front of the light. Grenier waited patiently. He liked what he saw. Steve watched with fascination as the Gemps inspected the screen. A few moments later, Tutu grabbed a chair and started scrutinizing the projector. He found the keypad controls and pressed a red button. The projector powered off. Oscar bantered and moved over to Steve. Steve smoothed Oscar's hair as the little chimp's teeth clicked. Grenier pressed the on button. Tutu and the other Gemps jumped. Tutu pressed the red button again. The projector blinked out. Grenier pressed the on switch. Tutu pressed the red button. Lights on, lights off, lights on, lights off, lights on. Moss said,
Tutu, Grenier turns thing. Projector.
Grenier interrupted.
Projector, by small piece of wood he is holding.
Tutu walked over to Grenier. Grenier moved the control away as Tutu tried to snatch it from his hand. Tutu hissed. Grenier, taking his cue from Steve, hissed back, and louder. Tutu hadn't expected that. He remembered Grenier dishing out his own brand of death on the wild Gemps. He backed down. Grenier said,
Ask me nicely and I'll give it to you.
Tutu stared. Grenier stared back. Tutu blinked first.
I changed my mind. All right by me, but I would like you to sit back down in the chair so that I may continue.
Tutu stood his ground.
You wanted answers, yes?
Grenier said. Tutu nodded.
Then please, sit back down.
The Gemp stood fast.
Please, Tutu. Answers. Promise.
Tutu frowned and walked back to his chair. He sat in a huff. The others were already seated. The large human face was still on the screen.
Mary.
Grenier continued.
She was one of your caregivers.
He resumed the video. Mary said, Hi. She stepped back to show a thin, blonde-haired young woman with a bright smile. Her hair was tied back with a pink bow. She wore bright pink spandex pants and a green cotton top that was partly covered by a long white lab coat. When she talked, she seemed to bubble and gush. Welcome to the farm. My name is Mary, and I'll be your host. She giggled. The camera followed Mary throughout the tour. It stopped and focused on a group of very young-looking Gemps. Tutu was standing over a young Moss and Kiri. Young Tutu was angry and yelling at the two. My toy! My toy! My toy! Mary ran over and rubbed Tutu's chest. Yes, Tutu, your toy, but you can share. It will always be your toy until you decide to give it away. But right now, you are sharing. My toy! She smoothed his head and said, Strong, Tutu, your toy. My toy! Mary changed her voice. Tutu. He was startled and looked her in the eyes. Brave, strong, wise Gemps share. Your toy, but you like to share. He nodded and relaxed. Tutu will share. The scene changed. Hila and Femi were playing with blocks of wood. Oscar walked over, sat next to the two, kissed each other on the cheek, knocked the blocks over and ran. Femi and Hila chased Oscar, knocking things over, laughing and screaming. Steve appeared.
Oscar!
Oscar playfully screamed while being chased. He ran into Steve, knocking him down. Hila and Femi stepped on Steve as they followed. The scene changed again. A room filled with Gemps seated behind desks were listening to Kelly recite the alphabet. Another change. Gurnier is staring into the camera. He is holding it.
Hopefully we're on to 2-stage by the time you see this. I'm sorry, but if you're seeing this video, I apologize again. You didn't believe me. You didn't remember who I am. You don't remember Steve, Kelly, or when you first met Oscar. Making you forget was necessary. Now it is necessary you believe, and we move on. Enjoy your new freedom. This is where life will get exciting, and you have a purpose. Learn everything.
A young Tutu snatches the camera. Learn, 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 learn! Gurnier gets control of the camera again. He's relaxed and smiling.
Until then.
A collage of different scenes played on the screen. A few minutes later, the video ended. Gurnier turned on the light. Ma stared at Steve. I don't remember. Not God anymore, but now is Steve. Steve nodded.
You will, in time. But now you'll have a whole new world of learning ahead of you. You'll see things as I and Oscar Elder sees them. I am mad,
Tutu said. Gurnier nodded.
I know. I am mad at you and the other humans.
Gurnier nodded again.
I understand, but I need your help now. No help!
I will help, Moss spoke up. Carrie added, Moss help? I help. Femi and Hila nodded. Tutu asked,
Why would I help?
Brave, strong, wise Gemps help. That's why. Tutu's face relaxed after a second. He nodded.
Tutu will help.
Gurnier smiled. Damn, that conditioning was strong. Chapter 11. Codper had a large map of the island spread across the hood of a Humvee. A dozen locations were circled in an odd, misshapen circle. A walkie-talkie chirped several times. Codper grabbed it.
Alpha base ready.
The voice crackled several times.
Outpost 4 and 5 are negative. Moving to post 7. Post 1 and 12 last. Over.
Codper X'd out the circles marked 4 and 5 on the map. 7, 1, and 12 were left. Gurnier held up a handgun that was converted to shooting tranquilizer darts.
This is called a magazine, and it holds 6 darts.
He pulled a bullet out from the magazine.
This thin covering breaks away the moment the bullet leaves the barrel.
He pointed to the front end on the gun.
You squeeze the trigger toward you to fire the gun. The gun will kick a little, so you have to hold it firmly in your hand.
He placed the magazine into the pistol grip. Slide back on the barrel and let it slide forward. He took the gun off safety, aimed at the far wall of the storage room, and squeezed the trigger. Tutu and the others jumped from the gun's bark.
Outside, the gun won't sound as loud.
He walked over to a black chest marked Weapon Accessories and opened it. He pulled out plastic eye protectors and headphones for the Gemps. The humans got earplugs. Steve and Kelly helped Oscar and the Gemps with their headphones.
Tutu, you first. I want to show you how to fire this gun.
Tutu slowly walked over. He understood that squeezing the trigger made it bark, but he was still apprehensive enough to eye it cautiously. Grenier positioned Tutu with the gun in his hands.
Tutu, place your index finger here along the barrel.
He tapped Tutu's index finger.
Get a firm grip. It will jump out of your hands if you hold it too lightly.
He made sure Tutu had a firm grip.
Place the tip of your index finger on the trigger.
He had to push the fingertip over the trigger.
Pull the tip of your index finger toward...
Bang! Tutu nearly dropped the gun.
Very good. Do it again.
Bang! Tutu did not jump as dramatic as before.
Better. Fire again.
Bang! Grenier nodded.
Fire again, but this time on your own.
Tutu did, and he liked it. Grenier went through the steps with the other Gemps. Femi dropped the weapon once. Moss dropped it 3 times. Kiri and Gila fired the weapon like pros. Grenier, satisfied the Gemps could fire the weapon without killing themselves, moved to the next stage, teaching them how to aim and to safely carry the gun. Reloading was last. 1 hour later, Grenier decided it was time to break. All his Gemps learned at a phenomenal rate. They all had excellent eyesight and aimed with deadly accuracy.
Time to eat,
Grenier said. He walked over to a storage box marked MREs, pulled a dozen out, and handed a pack to each person. He ripped the top off with his teeth and spilled the contents onto the conference table. The Gemps mimicked him. Steve opened Oscar's. Fast learners, Grenier told himself. Very fast. Almost too fast. As everyone ate, he got up and walked over to the weapons accessory box. He pulled out communication earpieces. He tapped on a small button on the side of each comm piece. Only one needed a new battery. He walked over to the table and handed everyone an earpiece, including Oscar.
Tap this button to turn it on. Tap it again to turn it off. Tap this button to change how loud the talking is.
Moss said, "Loud?" Grenier nodded. He tapped his piece on and placed it in his right ear. The back wrap hooked nicely over his ear. He positioned the mic close to his mouth. Moss did the same thing.
Can you hear me?
Moss ripped the piece away from his ear.
That is loud. Tap this button to make the noise softer.
Moss put the piece back on and tapped the volume button.
How is this?
Grenier asked. Moss had the volume down to 2. Does not hurt. Sound normal like you are next to me. Grenier nodded. Quick study.
All right, everyone. Place your comm pieces on and adjust the volume.
Kelly helped Oscar with his comm piece. The chimp grunted several times and moved his mouth like he was talking. Steve scratched the top of his head.
Now that we have been fed, can safely shoot our weapons, and have communication, here is what we are going to do.
He looked around at the stern expressions around him.
We are outnumbered and outgunned, but we have the element of surprise on our side. The bad humans think we can't fight back. We can, and we will. I'll make this plan simple. We shoot as many of them as we can. Go for the arms, stomach, and legs, please, not the head.
Kiri asked, "Will they be dead?"
If you shoot the head, yes, but we want them to fall asleep. That's what the bullets do. They are special bullets. The bad humans have to be punished. Killing them is not a punishment. Sleeping is not a punishment,
Tutu responded.
True, but when they wake up, they will be put into a cage for a very long time. They will not be able to walk freely or see the sun or the moon. The cage is a little bigger than your shelter.
Gila and Femi gasped. That is bad. The proximity alarm went off. Chapter 12. Codper stared at the cave entrance through binoculars. His Humvee was about 50 yards away, hidden by several trees. He sent 5 soldiers to the cave opening as advance guard and another 6 to the back entrance. He knew there was a third entrance, but it was unmarked. In passing some time ago, Grenier told him it was on top of a hill. Grenier sat at the command station and checked the displays. 2 soldiers slowly made their way to the front of the cave. 3 soldiers came up to the rear entrance. None on the mountain top or the jungle entrance. He remembered telling the colonel about the hilltop entrance, but not the one deep in the jungle.
Steve, Kelly, you two set?
They both nodded. Grenier turned to his small band of soldiers.
Remember, avoid headshots. Tutu, you lead. Steve and Kelly will be our eyes. They'll help as best they can from inside. Femi, you take the rear. Oscar, you keep soldiers busy.
Oscar grinned teeth and signed, busy. He made a B with his right hand and bumped its wrist against the wrist of his left hand several times. His Gemps. Grenier took a deep breath. His Gemps. Chances were good that they could come out of this alive. Though they had about 2 hours training, they took to handling weapons and communication gear at a scary fast pace. Uncle Sam got his money's worth. Codper watched as his advance guard disappeared through the cave entrance. His walkie-talkie crackled.
Entrance cleared.
A minute later,
Rear entrance cleared.
Tutu stepped out of the exit first. It was a disguised, rotting tree trunk centered amongst a cluster of tall, leafy trees. One by one, the Gemp slowly slipped out of the hole, with Grenier taking up the rear. He had to improvise an LBE harness and belt for the Gemps at the last minute, but the look was impressive. They all wore goggled eye protection, a communications earpiece, the LBE, and belt. They all held their weapons pointing to the ground. As instructed, trigger index finger on the barrel, safety on. Each Gemp demonstrated they could click the safety off effortlessly before squeezing the trigger. Codper listened to the comm chatter. All doors except one had the access code changed. Codper lifted the binoculars to his eyes and started scanning all the mountain tops. Oscar popped out of one. He checked his map. The chimp was about 60 yards from the cave entrance. He picked up his walkie-talkie.
Golf 1, Mountain 3, about 50 meters, chimp.
He waited a second. The walkie-talkie crackled.
Alpha 1, target spotted.
Codper watched, through his binoculars, Oscar rocking back and forth. Nasty beast, he thought. Hope he hits you first shot. He counted to 3 when he saw the chimp flinch. He was so close. A nearby rock exploded inches from Oscar's feet. The little chimp disappeared down the backside of the mountain.
Golf 1, maintain visual on spot. Shoot at your discretion. Out.
Tutu signaled the other Gemps to fan out. Moss and Kiri took right, with Gila and Femi taking left. Grenier checked their 6. He heard Steve's voice on the comm.
Bad guys about 50 feet forward and left of G1.
Tutu stopped and scanned the area toward his left. He saw movement crossing in front of him. He moved 3 steps to his left and saw a soldier walking toward the cave entrance. He heard a shot and paused. Kelly said over the comm, "Miss, sniper tried for Oscar." Tutu took another step forward and to his left, clicked the gun off safe and aimed. He controlled his breathing, as Grenier instructed, and squeezed the trigger. The gun barked loudly, but the dart hit the mark. The soldier's right arm jerked wildly away from his body. A second later, he collapsed. Tutu smiled. A flood of hormones hit the young Gemp. He had a heart-on. Codper heard several shots, all of which did not sound like M16 rounds. He clicked the walkie-talkie talk button several times.
All teams, report in.
Team 6, crackled in.
Team 10,
came next.
Team 5.
Team... A gun barked through the tiny speakers. Codper said, "Fuck." He pulled his sidearm out and stepped away from the Humvee. Grenier made his way to an area that had a good vantage point. He spotted 2 soldiers hiding in the foliage. Amateurs, he thought, as he aimed his pistol and barked out a round for each. Grenier moved further into the bush. He checked his 6 and saw movement. He was being shadowed. Stepping to the right, he squatted down behind a tree. His shadow stopped a moment, then moved to the left. He heard, "Geo, I'm to your left." He peeked around the tree and saw Moss with Kiri moving toward the Humvee.
Roger that. I see you.
Moss spotted Grenier first. He signed to Kiri.
Over there, Geo.
She nodded and followed Moss. Both had been about 20 feet from Grenier when they saw him aim his pistol and double-tap his trigger. He moved another 6 feet when he stopped for several seconds. He looked back and darted behind a tree. The 2 moved left of his position and transmitted they were near. Kiri noticed that Grenier let out a slight sigh. Oscar scampered down the side of the mountain after a small rock exploded near his feet. He made his way to the jungle floor and worked his way to the Humvee. He never liked the Colonel. Steve said he could bite him now, and that was what he was going to do. A real nasty bite. One that would show blood, maybe bone. Oscar was happy with that thought. Very happy. Codper thought he heard a twig snap. 2 more teams stopped reporting, and now he was worried. Oscar had worked his way through the jungle around the long way to the Humvee. He could smell the Colonel's fear. It was thick and sour. Codper turned around and saw the little chimp seconds before it leaped at him. Tutu had taken out several other soldiers. The thrill of hunting humans was almost too much. It was like a high he had never felt before. It was better than sex, and the buildup was unbelievable. Grenier had followed Moss and Kiri. Intuitively, the Gemps understood that Codper was the head of the snake. They moved through the jungle bush quickly, almost like they were born from the land. It was uncanny, he thought. Hours ago they feared God. Now they instilled the fear of God. If only he had the Gemps during Iraq and Afghanistan. Moss and Kiri moved quickly through the bush. Grenier was behind them, but at a distance. Moss knew the human was capable of keeping up at this pace. Any faster and he would be further behind, out of sight. As Moss gave a quick side glance to Kiri, he heard Steve's voice over the radio.
Oscar just jumped the Colonel.
Then he heard a distant gunshot.
Oscar's down, Steve said. Don't know how bad. Someone hurry.
Tutu heard the shot and picked up his pace. The elder down, he thought. The bad human was going to hurt for this one. Moss emerged from the jungle line in time to see Tutu on the other side of the Humvee. Codper had his left hand over what was left of his ear. His entire left side bloodied with a remnant of the ear exposed. Oscar bit through the cartilage, and for that, Codper shot him. Codper screamed.
You fucking monkey!
Oscar slowly got up, holding his right arm. It was a flesh wound, but deep enough to matter. He hissed at the Colonel. Codper aimed his pistol. This time, he thought. This time, you die, you piece of shit, goddamn fucking little beast. I hate you. Tutu aimed his pistol and squeezed off a round. Grenier said no headshots. Tutu didn't obey. The round struck Codper just behind the right ear. It shattered and knocked Codper to the ground, unconscious. Unfortunately, the slow velocity bullet hit bone and disintegrated without penetrating. Codper would live. Grenier wished he had been faster. When he entered the clearing, it had already been too late. Codper was face down in the dirt. He walked over and felt for a pulse. The bastard was still alive. Pity. He resisted the urge to double-tap some rounds into the back of his head, but the bastard needed to face military justice. He needed to spend life in a prison, making big rocks out of little rocks until the day his ghost left his miserable, pathetic, hypocritical body. So much pain and suffering this one man caused, all for a belief. Gurnier did what he thought a fitting punishment on his part. He spat in the colonel's unconscious face.
Bastard,
he said, backed up 10 feet from the colonel and shot him in the leg. He then picked up the walkie-talkie.
This is Colonel Gurnier. Lieutenant Colonel Codper has been incapacitated. A SEAL team has been dispatched to assist us and will arrive soon. You get one chance to surrender. This is it. I will not be making a second offer. Colonel out.
He placed the walkie-talkie in his pocket and turned around. His Gemps had assembled around him. Oscar was between Gila and Feemy. They were smoothing his head and making him feel better. Gurnier's Gemps, he thought. God help this world now. The end.
Thank you for listening to the final chapters of GEMP. If you enjoyed GEMP, please like and subscribe. Until then.
Look in our eyes and understand we are a better reflection. Human but not engineered to be better, to be different. A clean slate to mark up, an empty glass to fill. We are the future.